Welcome in to Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. We have got a lot to discuss that came from last night's midterms. I sat around and watched them late into the night, also watched Duke, Kentucky, and also kept tabs on the always important Kent State-Buffalo game. But we have got much to discuss. We will dive right into all of it. My name is Clay Travis. This is Outkick the Show. I hope everybody is having a fantastic Wednesday wherever across this great nation or this great world you may find yourself. I am your fearless leader. I'd encourage you to go check out sportsbookreview.com. I just put up 14 gambling picks for you in the recent history here. I'm trying to do the math here. I think I'm 11-3. No, 13-3. In my last 16 college football gambling picks. I'm on fire. We're at over 57% on the Outkick picks. We're at 60% on the year. If you combine the picks I gave you on Outkick also with the picks I give you on Lock It In, I will be on Lock It In a little over an hour from now. But in the meantime, we have got a lot to run through. Big news off the jump here. Donald Trump has fired or forced the resignation of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the former senator from Alabama. He will now have to find a new attorney general. He will be buoyed in that new search by the fact that he has picked up at least 3 senators. It'll probably be relatively easy, I think, for the Senate to figure out who the attorney general is. But the Donald Trump reality show rolls on. It never stops. You barely have time to even understand what is going on. I encourage all of you to check out sportsbookreview.com. Make sure you get the best possible numbers wherever you may be across the entire country. And I hope that all of you are having fantastic days. I also hope that you are having a good roll of late in the economy, as many people are. I'll get to some of the exit polls that I thought were intriguing. One of them was, do you approve of the economy? Let me give you that exact quote right now. And the reason why I'm going to use that is I do think it was instrumental and integral in some ways in thinking about how things are going as opposed to being perpetually outraged, which is the position that the Democratic Party has adopted of late. What's the condition of the economy right now? Even with Donald Trump hated, 65% said excellent or good. You get 65% of people agreeing on anything. That means things are probably going pretty well. 34% said not so good or poor, meaning that they've evidently never seen a good economy in their life because people can't even find jobs right now because people can't hire for their jobs because there are more jobs available than there are people to fill them. That's how good the economy is right now. Also, if you are having a good run of it in your economy, but you are maybe spending a little bit more money than you wanted to, my guy Ryan Kelly will take care of you. Go to thehomeloanexpert.com. You will be glad that you did. Can wipe out all of your credit card debt, all of your student loan debt. You will be well on your way to saving a bundle if you let my guy Ryan Kelly take care of you. He's the Nick Saban of mortgages, thehomeloanexpert.com. All right, so much to get to. I want to start here with my big takeaways from the midterms. I'll give you the latest odds on Jeff Sessions. I don't think it's a surprise that Sessions is out. I don't want to be Dow guy, but the stock market today is up 500 points. That suggests the stock market is happy with the idea of the Democrats having control of the House of Representatives, with the Republicans maintaining control of the Senate. This was, by and large, a status quo election. And while many people will become obsessed with who the Attorney General is, the actual impact, I don't think, is going to be that substantial as to who the Attorney General is, because ultimately Donald Trump is pulling all of the strings, and Donald Trump wants to be entertained, but his overall policies, I don't believe, are going to fundamentally alter the trajectory of the country, no matter who the new Attorney General becomes. All right, I understand it's the fevered dream of Democrats right now that this Mueller investigation is going to somehow uncover massive corruption. It's going to be a huge deal. I don't think people care. I think people assume that Donald Trump is not particularly steadfast in his virtue, right? And that's why everything that gets thrown at Donald Trump is not really impacting things. Remember Stormy Daniels? Remember how everybody's like, oh, this is going to be a huge story, this Stormy Daniels thing. We got this 60 Minutes exclusive. And then you know what happened? most of America shrugged. Most of America said, yeah, we figured Donald Trump wasn't faithful to any of his 3 wives. The fact that he might have slept with somebody else isn't surprising. The fact that a rich guy would pay a woman he slept with to keep his family from finding out about it didn't move the needle, just like it didn't do it for Bill Clinton. And that's because we all assumed it was true of Bill Clinton, just like I think we all assume it's true of Donald Trump. The same thing is going to happen with this investigation with Mueller. The people who hate Donald Trump are going to say, oh my God, he has to go. The people who love Donald Trump are going to say, you know what, he didn't have anything to do with this. He's not responsible for it. I'm just telling you, this is a sideshow, a carnival sideshow, right? And I don't understand why more intelligent people don't realize that. The New York Times did like a 40,000 word expose on Donald Trump's taxes. And you know what happened? Nobody cared. Nobody cared about Donald Trump's taxes because you know what they assume? Rich people pay as little amount of tax as they possibly can. And rich people have a lot better accountants than you or I do. So figuring out that that's true doesn't really change anything. Donald Trump didn't release his taxes. That managed to still get elected despite it. And that's because people just really don't care. Okay, so there's a lot of things that the national media gets obsessed with that the overall public does not become obsessed with. I learned this at a young age. When I was in college in Washington, D.C., I would read the Washington Post every day, and I would think that people cared a great deal about all the latest political shenanigans. And then I would go back home to Nashville, and I would realize how little people actually cared or were paying attention on a day-to-day basis because they got serious things in their life, and they don't really care in the grand scheme of things about all the day-to-day drama of D.C. This is something to entertain people who are obsessed with politics. The average person out there, the average voter, is not following it on a day-to-day basis. The funniest angle on this was the Saudi Arabia story. I thought the Saudi Arabia story was insanely interesting. The media covered the Saudi Arabia murder of the journalist in Turkey as a modern-day whodunit. The average American member of the voting public had no idea it ever happened, never cared. Okay? So sometimes it's important to take off your brain and recognize that you might care about something to a great deal, and then at the same time, other people do not. So the latest outrage or the latest attack upon civility or the latest propaganda piece that the president puts out, there's a certain segment of the population that's going to support him. There's a certain segment that's not, and nothing is changing, right? And so I'm going to get into that momentarily. But what was my big takeaway of the midterms? The first thing I would say that was my big takeaway in the midterms is how big of a deal it was that Donald Trump decided he was only going to campaign basically in Senate elections, and almost all the Senate elections he campaigned in made a tremendous difference. The Wall Street Journal quoted Donald Trump as saying he expected to win the Senate races in Florida. He expected to win the Senate race in Indiana, the Senate race in Missouri, and the Senate race in North Dakota. He won all 4 of those. They lost, the Republicans did, a race in Nevada. They will pick up 3 Senate votes already. That's massive. I think that is the biggest story of the midterm, is that Republicans have gone from 51 to 54 in the Senate, and that's assuming that Montana is going to end up going with Tester. I apologize. I tweeted out early this morning when Rosendale, I believe is his name, was up. As more ballots have come in, Tester has become the favorite there. So it now looks like Tester is going to actually win there. The net result will be that the Democrats pick up 3 seats in the Senate. So this idea that there was going to be a massive blue wave and it was somehow going to impact things on a substantial scale did not materialize. This was a status quo election. The Democrats picked up the House. I don't think that's going to be very good for them in 2020. Let me explain why. First of all, as a result, Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters are going to be elevated as legitimate foils of Donald Trump. If Donald Trump had to pick 2 people to be his foils right now, Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi could not rate any higher on his desired combat scale. This is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think a huge win for Donald Trump. In fact, they would never say it publicly, but I think there was a belief that the best way to get Donald Trump reelected in 2020 was to give Democrats some levers of power and let them overreach. I tweeted this out, but I want you to think about it for a minute. Democrats hate Donald Trump so much now They are perpetually outraged. They're perpetually angry. They don't understand that their outrage and their anger fuels Donald Trump's rise. They are not going to beat Donald Trump by being outraged and by being angry. All that does is make them look more deranged than Donald Trump. You are not going to out-anger Donald Trump. Conservatives, for whatever reason, tend to be angrier than liberals. Liberals do not beat conservatives by being angry. Liberals beat conservatives by believing in a better future. People come after me all the time because I said Obama ran incredible campaigns in 2008 and in 2012. His campaigns in both of those years were quintessential American campaigns rooted in optimism and the idea of America being a shining city on the hill. That is what Ronald Reagan sold. Okay, if you think about the last 40 years of American politics, who sold what? George Bush Sr. sold, I'm Ronald Reagan's guy, I'm going to continue. Ronald Reagan sold irrational American exceptionalism, and not irrational in the sense of it being bad, but irrational in being the sense of it being projected so large, and that America was going to be the shining city on the hill, a beacon of light and liberty for everybody else across the entire world. Ronald Reagan sold American exceptionalism. Much of what Donald Trump has sold is actually repackaged Ronald Reagan, okay? Reagan won in 84 and in 1980 with optimism, a sunny disposition of what America could be. Conservatives then responded very positively to Ronald Reagan. George Bush Sr. sold the idea of I'm connected to Ronald Reagan. Bill Clinton picked up the Ronald Reagan mantra and ran with it in 1992 and 1996. The reason why people would forgive Bill Clinton's personal failings was because he was ultimately an innate optimist. The man, the boy from Hope, Arkansas, the kid who came out of nowhere and became the next president of the United States. He could feel everybody's pain, but he always believed, Bill Clinton did and still does, that everybody was going to be better tomorrow than they were today. He believed in a unique element of American exceptionalism. Barack Obama picked up on that. George W. Bush, it's difficult because George W. Bush in 2000 was a compassionate conservative, and then by 2004, 9/11 had happened, and it changed everything about George W. Bush. 2000, he was a compassionate conservative. He was selling the American dream. By 2004, he was the national protector. It changed everything about George W. Bush's run for the office. 04 was about the response to 01 more than anything else. In 08, Obama picked up the Bill Clinton arguments of positivity. Same thing happened in 12. Trump won by being angry. It's rare to win by being angry, but Donald Trump's base was motivated by anger, derision, discord, dismay, the idea that America was falling and needed to be risen up again. Hillary Clinton tried to beat that Donald Trump enthusiasm by going after him on an identity politics-based election. Hillary tried to run a campaign that Barack Obama ran, but she ran it without any of the aspirational hopes of Barack Obama. She tried to go grab gay people. She tried to go grab women. She tried to go grab minorities, and she tried to cobble all those people together and argue that their identity could outwork Trump's identity. The problem was she didn't tap in to any emotional response like Donald Trump did. I believe that if I were trying to advise Democrats on what to do in 2018, the way to respond, I believe, is by what Beto O'Rourke did in Texas. If I were trying to sketch out how Democrats beat Donald Trump in 2020, it's not by saying when they go low, we kick them down lower like Eric Holder. It's not by being Michael Avenatti and being as angry at Donald Trump is at the world. It's by being the exact opposite of Donald Trump. It's by running a campaign that makes Donald Trump incidental to the overall campaign. Can you imagine how angry Donald Trump would get if Donald Trump ran an election campaign and the person who was running against him didn't pay attention to him? Just said, you know what, I think Donald Trump has done an okay job I think I can do a great job. I think Donald Trump has been fine. I think the economy has done okay under him. I think we can do better. I don't think he's a bad person. I don't think he's been an awful president. I just think as a country, we can do better. Donald Trump does not know how to respond when you don't attack him. The way to beat Donald Trump is not in any way to attack him. I don't know why Democrats can't see this. I think they're blinded by their anger. Sometimes you just have to take a step back and think logically. You combat Donald Trump not by trying to match his outrage, not by trying to match his anger, but by saying, you know what? I think we can be better as president, my administration, than Donald Trump has done. I think there's been a lot of turnover. I think there's been a lot of turmoil. I think there's been a lot of daily angst. I don't blame Donald Trump for any of that. I think he's trying to do his best. I just think I can do better. And America is about finding people who can do jobs better than the people before them. Now, maybe you disagree. Maybe you think Donald Trump's doing a great job. I don't consider you to be deplorable. I don't consider you to be an awful human being. I think you're trying to make the best decision you can as a hardworking American every day. Now, let me make my case to you why I think my solutions make better sense than his do. Nothing against Trump. Here's my case. That's what Democrats should be doing. Now, somebody I saw in the comments said, well, Beto lost in Texas. Yes. But if he could make Texas close on terrain that is not favorable to him, then he could potentially do very well on more favorable terrain. Now, remember, in a big Senate race back in 1858, people don't remember what actually happened in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. They've heard about the Lincoln-Douglas debates, but Stephen Douglas actually won the Illinois Senate race against Abraham Lincoln. Yet Lincoln's defeat in 1858 was so impressive that it captivated him by propelling him to become the next president of the United States running as a Republican. Losing that Senate election actually freed up Abraham Lincoln to become president. Now, I'm not saying Beto would work, but I'm saying the way that he ran his campaign is the way I believe Democrats should run a national campaign. Okay? Here's the other thing. Democrats, if you look towards 2020, essentially know what? Let's go back to the election results that we had last night. What I thought were significant. Republicans won governorships in Florida. They also won the Senate and kicked out Bill Nelson. And now we're going to have in Rick Scott, right? They also won the gubernatorial race in Georgia. The people that the Democrats were in love with don't actually connect that well with the voting public. That's because Democrats are indexing social media in the way that they try to respond to the nation. This is simple, and I want you to just listen to me closely. The 2020 election, if it were run the same way as 2018, Donald Trump would have won. Donald Trump would have won because Florida, the two Republicans won, and because in Ohio, the Republican governor won. If Donald Trump wins Florida and Ohio, he is going to be the president of the United States. The way our electoral college system works, many of the states are already decided. If in 2020 Donald Trump can win Florida, and if he can win Ohio, and certainly if he can win Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, the race is not going to be close from an electoral college perspective. So if I were a Democrat looking at these results, I would be trying to select a nominee who was capable of winning in Florida, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. What can I do to get a candidate who speaks to those audiences, because that's where the election is going to be decided? And to me, that candidate would need to be somebody like Beto, or, and I've been making this argument for a long time, it needs to be somebody like Joe Biden. Even though Joe Biden is old, I think he's the same age as Donald Trump. If they were able to go out and run a campaign head-to-head, two old white guys, I think Donald Trump and Joe Biden would be fighting over that high school educated white voter in those markets. The problem that Democrats are going to run into is they're not going to listen to logic. They're not going to listen to sense. By the way, I also love Michael Bloomberg's campaign against Donald Trump. Democrats are going to do what Republicans have all too often started to do as well, which is pick someone that the other party hates. Democrats, instead of trying to find a candidate that is going to appeal to the nation, I believe, are going to pick somebody that they think will fight dirty with Donald Trump. And that's why I think we will get somebody like Kamala Harris. That's why I think we'll get somebody like Cory Booker. That's why I think we will get Elizabeth Warren, somebody on the left wing who is angry at Donald Trump, because the most likely voters in the Democratic primaries are going to be angry voters. And angry voters are not going to be driven by logic. They are going to pick someone that is going to make Donald Trump angry and that is going to respond to Donald Trump's anger with their own particular brew of vitriol. That's what they want. Again, it's easy to demagogue people you dislike. Certainly Trump has done it. Certainly many Democrats have done it before. Hillary Clinton did it when she called voters who didn't like her deplorable. The problem with that is all of that feeds into Donald Trump's machine. And Democrats don't understand that every time they attack Donald Trump, they aren't weakening him, they are elevating him. And this is the number one story that should be recognized, but they can't because the media desperately needs Donald Trump. He has played into their sense of importance. When he attacks them, he's telling them, you matter. And ultimately, when journalists fight back with Donald Trump, what they're really doing is not fighting Donald Trump. They are arguing that they made the right decision when they decided to become journalists instead of going to school to become doctors, instead of going to school to become lawyers, instead of going to school to become another job. Journalists, deep down, are insecure about their profession, and they constantly need to be told that they matter. In that way, Donald Trump and the journalists are two sides of the same mirror. They feed off of each other. Trump needs to be told in the media constantly, you matter. You are important. Remember that scene in The Help where the nanny grabs the girl by the chin and she says, you is strong, you is pretty, you is important, or whatever exactly that line is, to teach that little girl to have a lot of self-esteem? That's journalists and Donald Trump. They look back and forth at each other and they see each other in the mirror. Journalists believe they're much more important than they actually are. Journalists are just employees of news organizations who exist to make money for their news organization. Nothing else. I understand the idea, we appeal to a higher standard and ideal. You make more money when the most possible people care about what you say. That is the people who make the most money. All right. If you were in the business of not trying to make money as journalists, I would say, you're appealing to a higher standard. Every single journalist on earth makes more money if more people watch them. What's the best way to get more people to watch you? Get into a feud with somebody who's super famous. So I don't get all worked up because I've looked at the history of journalism. I wrote about it in my new book. If you haven't read my book, maybe you don't even know who I am. Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. Being non-biased and being fair is not about a necessity of journalism. It's a business mandate. Because at the turn of the 19th century, instead of being partisan newspapers decided we're going to try to appeal to everyone by saying that we're nonpartisan. Instead of just selling newspapers to Democrats or just selling newspapers to Republicans, or Whigs or Tories or Libertarians or whoever it was, you said, no. We're not picking sides. We want everybody to pay attention to us. We are super relevant. We're just going to call balls and strikes, right? That's what journalists tried to do. It's a great advertising slogan. Because what has happened is, since that time, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN have blown up in terms of producing revenue, the idea that impartial news is the way to produce an audience. People want to be told that their worldview is correct, and they seek out whatever media tells them that their worldview is correct. One of the ironies here is I don't actually spend that much time doing it. I think there's also simultaneously a deep desire for somebody to just tell you exactly what he or she thinks. Because everybody else out there, to a large extent, I believe, is trying to do whatever they can to maximize their audience by going all in on one side or the other. That's the modern day media environment. And so this idea that journalists somehow have a job that no one else aspires to or anything else, the average journalist is less important than the average school teacher. The average journalist is less important than the average firefighter. The average journalist is less important than the average police officer. The average journalist is less important than the average soldier. But they have sold themselves as being so much more important than all those people that when Donald Trump punctures the illusion of their moral supremacy, they can't handle it and they roll into the mud with Donald Trump, which actually helps Donald Trump further solidify his base. That's what I believe. All right, a couple of other thoughts. Again, Republicans winning in Florida and Ohio, the gubernatorial races, that's where the election is going to be decided. Also in Michigan, also in Pennsylvania, also in Wisconsin. Something that also is not going to get that much attention. No one has any kind of historical knowledge or basis on social media or really much in the media at all. That's why I jotted down this note. Donald Trump right now has picked up 3 Senate seats and he has lost 26, was the most recent number I've seen, 26 House seats. Maybe it's going to end up being 27 or 28 or whatever it is. But in a historical context, here is what happened for the other midtermers. In 2010, media darling Barack Obama, who I voted for, lost 63 House seats and 6 Senate seats. Okay? He lost massively in the House and he lost massively in the Senate. In 1994, Bill Clinton lost 52 House seats and he lost several Senate seats as well. In 1958, Dwight D. Eisenhower, guy who happened to be a pretty good general, won World War II, lost 48 House seats. 1974, Ford, sitting in for Richard Nixon, lost 48 House seats. In 1966, Lyndon Johnson lost 47 House seats. 1946, Harry Truman taking over for FDR. He just won World War II. He lost 45 House seats. In 2006, George W. Bush, I didn't include 2002 because that was in 9/11 and that was a different era. In his second term, midterm, George W. Bush lost 30 seats. In 1950, Harry Truman, in his second term, lost 29 House seats at the midterm. In 1982, Ronald Reagan lost 26 2 years into his first term. And in 2018, Trump just lost 26 House seats. Donald Trump lost nearly 40 less House seats in his second year after his election than Barack Obama did. And unlike Obama, he was up in the Senate. Okay? You just heard a lot of those guys. Yeah, somebody just said, the man saved the world. Harry Truman saved the world and then ended up losing House seats. Dwight Eisenhower saved the world, lost House seats. That's an amazing stat. Truman kept us out of having to go to war in the Pacific by dropping the bombs in 1945. He lost 45 seats in 1946. Now, that might sound crazy. Why does that happen? Why does something like that happen? I think it's because innately Americans distrust power. And this is why I've never been threatened by Donald Trump like a lot of other people have. If Trump were going to become a dictator, he'd become the first dictator to take power while being hated by everyone who has a large media voice, it seems. What has happened in our country over and over again is we send messages to the person that we elect as president. We don't want you to be all powerful. We want there to be divided government. We want people to check and balance you by giving power to a competing entity to ensure that we don't go too far in one direction or the other direction. The radical moderate typically governs overall in America, and that has been the case ever since we founded our country and our government predicated on the idea of separation of powers. I believe that the House going to the Democrats is a good result for the country. The stock market agrees with me. It's up over 500 points today. The Senate staying with the Republicans, I think, is also a good result because it allows one arm of the government to continue to be functional, and it sets up what I think will be an epic battle in 2020 to decide who is going to be the president of the United States. And the great thing about that decision is that my vote counts the same as yours, and that every single one of us gets the opportunity to walk into a ballot booth and punch the ticket that we believe will lead this country to the best future. That battle in 2020 is going to be interesting. I loved the one in 2018, but I think effectively we got a status quo election. There was no red wave. There was no blue wave. Nobody took over anything in 2018. 2020 will be a doozy. My question is, will smart Democrats look at the results here and put forward a candidate to beat Donald Trump based on optimism, not anger? Or will they continue to compete against him in the outrage Olympics, in which case Donald Trump is going to be elected the next president of the United States in 2020 and serve out 8 years as the president of this country? Think about it, share it if you enjoyed my discussion of the 2018 midterms. My name's Clay Travis. I do a daily morning sports talk show, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, called Outkick the Coverage. I'm on Lock It In. I'm great at gambling. I'm about to make you a lot of money here in about a half hour on FS1. Politics is my fun. I love it. I enjoy it just like I love sports. It, to me, politics is just sports by another name. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. DBAP, boys and girls, unless you need to SBAP, because sometimes that's important too. See y'all.